Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist, in for Phil Sanchez. Congressman Jim Baird says changes to Medicaid and food stamps won't affect people who truly need it. The new federal budget bill includes work requirements for Medicaid and stricter requirements for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. I asked him about those requirements and the concerns Medicaid users have expressed to me over paperwork errors that could cost them their coverage. Let's bring in Congressman Jim Baird. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Well, appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I want to begin with the changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. The work requirement is being expanded to people up to age 64 and to people with dependents age 14 and older. Why did you settle on those two changes specifically?
That's where we think we have the greatest opportunity for people to have the to go to work, as well as the need for them to continue to work, because we found 28% of the ABODs, for example, those able-bodied individuals without dependents, were the only ones that are working. So that leaves another 70% or a little better that weren't working. And we have such a need for employees in this country that we think those changes and those dates and periods of time that we used seems to be more effective, more efficient, and more suitable for the kind of situation that we're in and where we need employees. But we also want to make sure that we don't affect mothers or children or the elderly or those disabled. So those were not impacted with this program.
Why ask the states to shoulder some of the costs of actually carrying out the program?
Excellent question. We had a lot of discussion about that, but you know, the states administer this program, and then the federal government funds it. And we felt like there was some need to have involvement so we can improve efficiency. And really, it is based on the error rates. And we find out that there are significant amounts of funds that are going either overpayments or underpayments, but mostly overpayments, that are going out under this program that could be used to help those in need. And so it's based on the error rate. It doesn't take effect till 2028. So that gives states the opportunity to correct any situation that they see and make efforts to make the program more efficient, more effective, and then delivered to, and you know, the whole goal of all of these programs in terms of, in my opinion, is simply that we deliver the taxpayer dollars to the intended use rather than letting them stray away from people that are in need.
Here in Indiana, we're facing a $2.4 billion revenue shortfall because of the economic uncertainty from President Trump's tariffs. Does a scenario like that, where a particular state is facing revenue problems, jeopardize the delivery of SNAP services under this new arrangement?
I don't think it does, because we put off the implementation of it till 2028, and who knows what's going to happen to the economy in that period of time. With some of the things we've done with the big beautiful bill, I think is going to really improve the economy when we expand the opportunities to go after more energy and to open up the economy and stimulate small business growth. In fact, manufacturing growth. We also took the opportunity to enhance what we're doing in agriculture, which deals with the food and deals with food with SNAP as well. So all of those things, I think, can change dramatically in the short period of time and resolve this concern that you just expressed.
Let's turn to Medicaid. I've heard from a number of Medicaid users who say that even though on paper they would qualify for the exemptions to the work requirements under the new federal budget bill, they're worried that they could still lose their coverage because of having to constantly redetermine their eligibility, and they're worried about paperwork errors. What's being done to prevent that?
Well, in the process of taking a look at this, and in the process of states trying to improve their error rates, if they're in that bracket, not all states are, but anyway, if they're making improvements in that error rate, then I think they're going to look at what is causing the concern for increased costs or the loss of funds, and that will definitely improve or stall off this problem you just addressed.
Well, but Congressman, the concern that these Medicaid users are raising, and this is also something that's been applied to SNAP, is that their paperwork could get lost in the shuffle every time they have to redetermine, and then as a result, they automatically lose their benefits. So what's being done to head off that specific problem?
Well, there again, if we're going to look at the efficiency and effectiveness and we'll look at the error rate, I think that's going to call attention to the program. And I think that's going to allow states to really review where those kind of things might be occurring. And if paperwork is a bottleneck, then certainly we ought to move to either electronic version or some other way of making sure we make that efficient and make it not difficult for those that are eligible and in need. And that opportunity will come as states review their program and how they're administering this project.
Does the bill provide any additional funding to help with redetermination to meet those new requirements?
Well, I think the savings that we're going to have in waste, fraud, and abuse and the increased revenue from additional manufacturing or additional jobs is certainly going to add to our revenue in the state, and that will help offset the concerns you might have in having the funds available for people in need.
So what do you say then to people who are worried that they're going to lose their Medicaid or their SNAP benefits?
I think I would say to them that we are trying to be very effective, very efficient, and we're well aware of those people in need. I'm talking about mothers, especially mothers, children, those with disability, or the seniors and veterans. And we want to make sure that we have the funds available to take care of them in this program.
Since you also serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I want to briefly turn to the Middle East. We haven't seen any major retaliation from Iran yet since the B-2 strikes on those nuclear facilities, other than the one missile strike against our military base in Qatar. Has the threat of retaliation from Iran as a result of that airstrike passed?
I don't think you can ever, when you're dealing with countries like that, ever feel totally safe. But the good thing that I see, or not necessarily a good thing, what I really see is that the Iranians feel that they have been devastated in a way, because those B-2 bombers, and you got to give credit to our military and the precision that they carried out that mission, and was able to return without even ever being detected. But those bunker buster bombs, and they put them in one right after the other in order to make sure they got down and took the nuclear capability away from those people. And I think the whole world feels a lot safer. And I think the Middle East, those other countries around in the Middle East, feel much safer.
How likely is it that Israel and Hamas will accept this latest ceasefire proposal from the Trump administration? And if they do accept it, how long do you think that ceasefire would hold?
I think the president is interested in peace in that region. And I think if you'll check with some of the other countries in that region, like Saudi Arabia and those, they're also interested in peace and progressive times. The fact that Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as Iran, have been so devastated, that really brings the need and the commitment to wanting to have peace. And so my estimation is, and it's just my estimate, is that this is the closest we've ever been to a long-term peace. And I think there's other countries in the region that would really like to see that occur.
Congressman Jim Baird, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson speaks in the Circle City. We'll bring you her surprising take on partisanship on the High Court. Welcome back. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson says the court is not as partisan as you might think. Her comments came during an Indianapolis Bar Association luncheon. It's the first time the organization has ever hosted a sitting U.S. Supreme Court justice. Much of Jackson's talk drew on her life story, including the memoir she published last year. She's the first black woman to serve on the High Court.
I was fortunate to have been a Supreme Court law clerk, so I was familiar with the building. Institution doesn't change that much. So I knew the general contours, but of course there's nothing like being a justice. But I'm sitting up on the bench and looking out for the first time was pretty extraordinary.
She's also the first public defender to serve on the court. Jackson says that taught her people going through the justice system often don't understand the processes they're going through.
I decided very early on that I was going to focus on communicating with the defendants who came before me in the courtroom. That, they might not agree with what ultimately happened to them if I sentenced them or whatever, but they weren't going to be confused about the process.
The court's 6-3 conservative majority has drawn headlines for years. But Jackson says many of the court's rulings do not break cleanly along party lines. She found herself on the same side as Justice Neil Gorsuch in several rulings this term.
You end up aligning with different justices at different times because the cases vary, and sometimes you'll find someone who you wouldn't ordinarily be aligned with, who thinks about this issue in the same way that you do.
Jackson did not address any particular cases, but she did provide a glimpse into how she decides when to write an opinion.
And it's because I feel like I might have something to offer and something to add, and I'm not afraid to use my voice. My parents gave to me a sense of my own ability to write and to speak out and to say what I have to say and to not be really offended by other people saying what they have to say.
Coming up, I talk solutions with Indiana's best political team a week after a shocking spate of youth violence in Indiana's capital city. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome back two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Kip Tu and Republican Tom John. Welcome to you both.
Good to be here, Greg.
So let's begin with local politics this time. Indianapolis leaders are considering a stricter youth curfew. That's in response to last week's mass shooting downtown. That killed 2 teens and left 5 more injured. Kip, this would back up the beginning of the youth curfew by 2 hours. Would it work?
Well, I mean, I guess we're going to try something and see if it does work. Well, we're not going to know for sure. Obviously, and Tom knows that these are not criminal charges, and so the ability to put somebody in prison isn't there to keep them off the streets. And I'm not sure that we would want that to happen because a lot of these people are, they're kids, obviously, and we don't want them to get a record because they happen to be out late, not doing anything wrong necessarily. So I think it's probably worth a try. Lots of other things have been tried. I would note that, Indianapolis right now is 30% lower in murder rate than they were this time last year, and 50% lower than it was in 21. That, of course, doesn't help the people that are suffering, the families that are suffering here today. But we are on the right track, although some days it doesn't seem like we are.
And Kip, the point that you raised does lead me into my next question. Tom, there have been quite a few studies that have found that if kids enter the juvenile justice system, that puts them at a much greater risk of being justice involved as an adult. So how do we enforce this without basically feeding into that prison pipeline?
Well, I think, as Kip said, these aren't criminal laws, but they are laws that protect the public safety. And so what we need to do is we need to enforce the laws that are on the books. Let's start there. This happened at 1:30 in the morning. The current current ordinance is 11 o'clock. So the mayor needs to give the police the support to actually go out and do the things that they need to do to protect this community. And really that's what this comes down to, is the lack of leadership. As far as the kids that you're bringing in, the idea is you take them to their house and say, is somebody here? Why is this child out? And then if those parents aren't answering, you need to then have a harder conversation, whether that's a city county building or whether that's at the state house, as to these parents' responsibility for their children and whether they should be responsible if they're not actually taking care of the children. The children are truant.
Kip, I saw you shaking your head there.
Yeah, well, I think Tom's ignoring a really important component of this problem, and that is we've had Republicans nationwide and Republicans statewide say our solution to violence is for everybody to have a gun. And so we have reached the point where just about anybody who wants a gun has a gun, and it hasn't solved the problem of violence. It's exacerbating it. And when you have young kids who have impulse control problems, getting a hold of weapons, this is the natural thing that happens. When I was growing up, they didn't have guns. They'd fight each other with fists, or they'd stab each other or something, but they didn't have access to guns. Now everybody has access to a gun, and that is a big problem that Republicans won't work with Democrats to try to fix. They absolutely refuse to do anything the NRA doesn't want them to do.
Tom, I'll let you respond, then we'll move on.
So, once again, Kip, I love him, but he goes back to the gun debate. It's an old trope of the Democrat Party. The simple fact of the matter is this in Indianapolis is an issue of Indianapolis leadership and the absolute lack of this mayor, who, when he ran the first time, said, I'm getting rid of the public safety director. I am your public safety director because I was the United States attorney,
Tom,
and I'm going to protect you.
The violent crime rate's going down in the city. So if you're looking
after it spiked enormously when he came in.
In 21, it spiked, and it spiked in every single city in the United States. Every single city in the United States.
The simple fact of the matter, his administration has been distracted by all the allegations, and, well, we don't know what's true or not true. We know what we've heard from the victims. What we have heard is abhorrent behavior in this administration, that they're focused on things that have nothing to do with protecting our community and their own dalliances. And the fact is, we've got bad leadership here, and that's what got us here, and that's why our police are not supporting.
I want to go ahead and
I
want to get us back on track here a little bit. And we've talked to some of the people who work with at-risk youth, and they say that we need someplace besides the Family Services Center to take youth who violate curfew. Tom, how realistic is that? And do the various nonprofits in this city, like say New Breed of Youth or what have you, have the resources to do that, especially at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, I think you've also seen in this administration, they've stripped different not-for-profits that have been active in this area. The 10-Point Coalition, a variety of others, do not have the same support that they had 10 years ago. And so many of the organizations are stepping up. Yes, we as a community need to step up. We need to support these organizations in that breach. And no, I think we probably don't have enough now. But that's a community conversation about both the city doing what it's historically done prior to this mayor, and the rest of us saying, okay, is that enough, and what more can we do? Because we do have an obligation to our community and to those children who are future members of our society to help them along.
Kip, how should the parents be held accountable for this?
Well, I mean, it's a big problem, and I don't have the solution sitting here today. If we had the solution sitting here today, someone probably would have done it. I take issue with him saying that this administration has abandoned this effort. I will tell you, I spent 10 years on the board of Fathers and Family Center. We need more organizations like the Fathers and Family Center, but that's a long-term solution, and it's a better long-term solution. It gets young folks out there learning about how to de-escalate problems, how to take care of their kids, how to get a job, how to get a GED, all those things. We need a lot more of those services. But you know, we've got a federal government and a state government that's cutting services everywhere. So it makes it more difficult. You got to rely on the philanthropic community, and that's more limited.
Tom, I'll let you respond to that. We've got about 45 seconds.
I just think this is simply yet again an example where, coming back to Republicans nationally and state, the fact is the governor has supported police and law enforcement at every juncture he could. He's offered the state police to help IMBD. This is a failure of the leadership of the city of Indianapolis, and we need to do something to really step up and support law enforcement in this city and support the community efforts to protect these children.
Kip, we'll give you the last word. Got about 20 left.
Well, I think Tom and I are in agreement that we ought to support the police. I don't think anybody, if you would ask Police Chief Bailey, I think he's getting the resources he'd like from the city, considering the constraints that they have. They need more resources. Everybody needs more resources. But I just take issue with Tom when he says the state has provided enough resources. I don't think they are.
All right. That's about all the time we have. Thank you both for coming in. Great conversation as always. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.